Welcome to the Republican Professor. I'm your host, Dr. Lucas J. Mather. Today is Friday, 6 March 2026 years after Jesus. Like I said, it's a Friday. We're coming at you today with Imprimis, a publication from Hillsdale College, January 2026, volume 55, number 1. We're going to do a fair use and make a transformative reading of this material. I'd like to thank Hillsdale College for making this available for free. And they send it to you in the mail. All you have to do is go to the website, sign up, or you alternatively, if you get your hands on a physical copy of this, they have a little mailer, postage is paid, and you can just send it in and you'll get it for free. The postage mailbox is Hillsdale College, P.O. Box 8917, Topeka, Kansas. For some reason, I'm not sure why, but that's the address, and you can sign up. Hillsdale College has been something I've followed since I was a child, since George Roche was a president. Um, Larry Arnn took over. I went to school with his daughters. His daughter. Man, I'm totally blanking on her name. Katie. Katie Arn. She changed her name when she got married I think she changed her name to Daniel Arn, I believe. That's an never mind. That's a stupid joke. She married a guy named Daniel, and she took his last name, I believe. So, um, guys, this is called Learning from Minnesota's Somali Fraud Scandal. And I read this over a cigar and I was like, I'm always tempted to do these on the podcast, but we just have so much material to cover. But when I read this thing from Scott W. Johnson, this is something that I wanted to cover on the podcast. Scott W. Johnson is co-founder of and contributor to powerlineblog.com. He earned his BA at Dartmouth College and his JD Vance, no, sorry, his JD at the University of Minnesota Law School, Minnesota, and practiced law for 35 years in the Twin Cities. A fellow of the Claremont Institute. Yeah! He has published widely on issues of public policy, including in National Review, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Post, the Minnesota Star Tribune, and the Washington Free Beacon. For more than 10 years, he has covered Minnesota 5th District U.S. Representative Ilhan Omar and three major trials in Minnesota involving Somali defendants. This is a publication of Hillsdale College. I'm going to share my screen and show you that they make this available for free. So you can see the website there if you're on YouTube. I hope I have this. You can download it, but I get mine in the mail. I just love that Hillsdale sends it to you in the mail. How old school is that? It's just great. I have lots of notes on here, so I'm going to be referring to I'm going to shine it on the screen for you, but I'm going to be referring to my notes, okay? So I'm going to be looking down quite a bit. Well, I'm just going to read it from my mailer because, and then I'll make the comments that I want to make on it, and we'll have some discussion if you'd like. The massive public programs fraud committed almost entirely by Somali perpetrators. This is how Scott W. Johnson begins his Learning from Minnesota's Somali Fraud Scandal. Uh, has recently exploded in the national news. The controversy is centered in Minnesota, where the amount of money bilked from American taxpayers could prove to be as high as $9 billion. Yeah, you got that right. $9 billion. A billion here, a billion there. Pretty soon you're starting to talk about real money. But the scandal is spreading to other states as well. When Ryan Thorpe and Chris Rufo published an article in the November 2025 issue of City Journal, another highly respected um, periodical that I would recommend. I haven't done any City Journal pieces on this podcast, but that's going to change. That's going to change because I've been following City Journal for a while and they do really good work. Really good work. Okay, so let's keep going. City Journal linking the fraud to the funding of Al-Shabaab, a Somali-based Sunni Islamist organization that is designated a terrorist group by several, turning the page, several nations, including the U.S. I'm going to share my screen again, including the U.S. President Trump took notice and announced the termination of the temporary protected status for Somali immigrants. In late December, YouTuber Nick Shirley posted a 42-minute video that showed him knocking on doors of Somali-run daycare centers in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area that seemed to have no children in attendance. The video went viral, quickly garnering more than 130 million views on X and 2.5 million views on YouTube. But while this story is new to most Americans, it is anything but new to Minnesotans and others who have been paying it the attention it deserves. Long known for having a largely Scandinavian population, and that's an interesting question. What is it about Minnesota that makes it so susceptible to this kind of public benefit fraud? Well, the Scandinavian countries are known for having um, a um, a gargantuan public sector in terms of entitlement. I'm not sure how they deal with fraud over there, but maybe it's that kind of culture that kind of just looks the other way. I don't know. I have no idea. I'm just pointing out this is a cultural conflict here. Minnesota, here, this is what I want to say about the cultural conflict. Okay. The From reading the title, you would think the cultural conflict is really between the US and Somalia. And I would venture to say it's a little bit more layered than that because the Scandinavian thing is also a part of American culture. And the Scandinavian thing is where people in Minnesota vote this crap in and then they don't pay attention to it. So that's also a cultural conflict with America. You got major Scandinavian public benefit largesse, and I'm not using the word generous because it's not generous. That's the wrong word. It's top heavy for sure. And I don't know where this looking the other way on fraud comes from, but apparently Minnesota has a real big problem with this. And it occurred before the Somalis got there, not after, but before. Minnesota has a cultural problem that invited this kind of fraud looking the other way. Now, why is that? Why are Minnesotans like that? What's going on in Minnesota? That's what I would ask. All right. So just lest you think I'm blaming Somalia, we're not. It's the issue of the Somalis saw an opportunity, they took advantage of it. You know, I mean, but why would they have that opportunity in the first place? You know? Hello? 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 As Michael Ullman used to say. Let's keep going. Minnesota is now home to the largest Somali population in North America, numbering roughly 100,000, most of whom are congregated in the Twin Cities metropolitan area. The seeds of this community were planted in the early 1990s when the State Department directed thousands of refugees from Somalia's civil war to Minnesota. Except for a dip in 2008, I almost thought he was talking about chewing tobacco there for a second. The immigration of Somalis into Minnesota has continued unabated, augmented by Somalis arriving from other states. The latter likely has to do with Minnesota's generous. No, it's not generous. No. Sorry, Scott. I have to say, you're wrong here. It's not generous. Wrong word. Top heavy and irresponsible, bloated welfare and charity policies. I would say lazy. Maybe lazy. I don't know. You tell me. You gotta pay attention here, guys. Come on. Come on. Yeah. As Professor Ahmed Samatar of St. St. Paul's McAllister College was quoted as saying in 2015 Washington Times story, Minnesota is the closest thing in the United States to a true social democratic state. Yeah, see, you can't blame that on the Somalis. The Somalis are taking advantage of that, right? Huh? They see an opportunity. They're corruption entrepreneurs, kind of like the mafia. I don't know if it's built into the culture. I don't know I don't know Somali culture. I don't know it. But the population there, at least the leadership in that population, seems to have seen something of an entrepreneurial opportunity. The massive fraud currently in the news was not the first controversy surrounding the Somali immigrant community. Around 2015, it proved to be a fertile source of ISIS recruits. The FBI's Minneapolis field office devoted substantial resources to terrorism related issues. A September 2015 report on the House Homeland Security Committee revealed that Minnesota led all other states in contributing foreign fighters to ISIS. Reviewing the public cases of 58 Americans who joined or attempted to join ISIS, it found that 26% of them came from Minnesota. Hmm. Of 10 Minnesota Somalis charged with seeking to join ISIS in Syria, 6 pleaded guilty and 3 were convicted at trial in June 2016. During the trial of the 3 Somalis who contested the charges, it became clear primarily from recordings introduced into evidence that although they gave outward appearance of American assimilation, they hated America. They took advantage of educational and employment opportunities and moved into and out of the workforce at will. At one time, all 3 worked at a UPS facility in a leafy St. Paul suburb where they enjoyed watching ISIS videos of beheadings during their breaks. Can you imagine your UPS guy? That's what he's doing on his breaks. This is a Democrat area. This is a Democrat state. Democrats. Democrats. Foreshadowing the fraud scandals of today. The Somalis involved in terrorism showed themselves to be sophisticated in their creative use of social welfare benefits. Also Democrats. You notice a theme here? Democrats. Democrats. Two of four Somali ISIS recruits intercepted at New York's JFK airport while en route to Syria had used federal financial aid funds to pay for their travel. One financed his planned trip to Syria with a $5,000 debit card withdrawal on his student loan account. In the decades since, the controversy over terrorist recruitment of Somalis has receded, and the Somali abuse of social welfare programs has proliferated. Oh, crap. Did I just destroy my copy? Jeez. I think I need to tape that. Okay. Child care fraud. Next section. The defrauding of Minnesota's child care assistance program for daycare services, although brought dramatically to national attention by Nick Shirley in late December, goes back more than 10 years. Jeff Bailon, I don't know how to say his last name, sorry, Baillon, a Twin Cities TV reporter, reported on daycare frauds in 2013 and 2015. A year ago this month, Jay Coles, Kolls, another local reporter, went to two of the 10 sites Shirley visited and reported that one of them was guilty of 95 violations, including no records for 16 children between 2019 and 2023. But taxpayer funds continued to flow to these programs. An illustrative case that arose in 2017 involved Foiza Sheikh Ali, Fazia Sheikh LA, I don't know how to say that, sorry, whose daycare center in South Minneapolis was suspected of billing the government over 1 million for bogus child care services. According to Special Agent Craig Lisher, Lisesher, the FBI found, I was on page 3 of the print edition, now I'm on page 4, found records that she was collecting a significant amount of money for a much larger number of children than were actually attending the center. Um, Ali's case had an international component as well. She used a phone app to charge Minnesota taxpayers for her stay at an 800 per night hotel in Nairobi, and some of the illegally obtained funds were found to have been transferred overseas, although the FBI declined to specify for what purpose. Ali pleaded guilty in 2018, March 8, 2018, to a charge of wire fraud and was sentenced to federal prison. Minnesota's Office of Legislative Auditor issued a detailed report on child care fraud in 2019. On the question of how much had been stolen, the report restricted itself to amounts established in convictions. Because convictions were few and far between, that came to between 5 million and 6 million. But the report concluded, citing the lax administration of the daycare program, that the level of fraud was likely higher. Indeed. And the laxity continues. Jim Nobles, the legislative auditor at the time of the 2019 report, wrote a recent column in the Minnesota Star Tribune decrying the permissive approach of Minnesota's state government that makes it easy for fraudsters to steal, and questioning why nothing had been done over many years to implement standard financial controls and oversight. Feeding Our Future Fraud. In that same Star Tribune column, Nobles wrote, "We now know that the fraud scheme used in the state's child care program has been used frequently in other state human service programs. A dramatic example of this is the case that has become known as the Feeding Our Future fraud." Feeding Our Future is a nonprofit organization that served as a sponsor of sites like daycare centers and restaurants that participated in two federal nutrition programs. During the peak COVID period from 2020 till January 2022, Feeding Our Future and its sites and their vendors found it remarkably easy to bilk these programs by filing false claims for reimbursement supported by false meal counts, fake rosters, and bogus invoices. Amy Bach was the founder and executive director of Feeding Our Future, as well as the ringleader of the fraud scheme. As the sponsor of more than 250 Feeding Our Future sites around the state, again, we're on page 4 on the second column of Learning from Minnesota's Somali Fraud Scandal by Scott W. Johnson from Powerline, published by Hillsdale-College for free, Pursuing Truth, Defending Liberty since 1844. Check it out at Hillsdale.edu. This is a free publication of Hillsdale College. It is available for free. All you have to do is sign up and they'll mail it to you. Okay. All right. So sorry. We're talking about Scott is talking about Amy Bach there. He says that she was the ringleader of the fraud scheme. As the sponsor of more than 250 Feeding Our Future sites around the state, Bach certified the accuracy of the ludicrously inflated meal claims that she submitted for reimbursement. While Feeding Our Future's sites and vendors are mostly Somali, as are those who have so far been convicted in the trials involving Feeding Our Future, Bach is white. I would say so-called white. So-called white. Adding a multicultural liberal. Liberal. You mean Democrat. She's a Democrat. Just say it, man. She is a Democrat. To the massive fraud. Democrat element to the massive fraud. Yeah. Yep. The free food programs were administered by the Minnesota Department of Education. What do you want to bet that that's all Democrats? What do you want to bet? And funded by the Federal Department of Agriculture, operating under the law adopted by Congress on account of COVID. The MDE proved a remarkably easy mark. Feeding Our Future sites multiplied like rabbits, and funds kept rolling out the door. In 2021 alone, Feeding Our Future siphoned off nearly $200 million of taxpayer money. It is important to note that suspected fraud was often never fully investigated because government overseers were easily scared off by absurd claims of racism. Racism. Charges that continue to be leveled even today. In February 2021, the FBI passed on allegations of fraud in the programs to the MDE. In April 2021, a frustrated MDE official tipped off the FBI regarding her own suspicions. FBI forensic accountant Pauline Rose followed up in the ensuing months by collecting relevant bank records to track the flow of funds. FBI Special Agents Jared Carey and Travis Wilmer followed up in the field. In the last 6 weeks of the investigation, they posted surveillance cameras outside of 12 Feeding Our Future sites that were supposedly feeding thousands of kids a day. The kids were nowhere to be seen. We're on page 5 of the print edition, again, January 2026, volume 55, number 1, Hillsdale-College's Imprimis. They boast over 7.3 million readers. Damn. Let's continue. On January 20th, 2022, the investigation went public when federal agents raided sites in the largest such operation ever conducted in Minnesota. The following September, the United States Attorney Andrew Luger called a press conference to announce the charges brought against the first 47 defendants in the case. Charges have now been brought against a total of 78 defendants. The latest of the 78 cases were charged this past November. In cases resolved so far, there have been 50 guilty pleas, 7 guilty verdicts, and 2 acquittals. 5 fugitives remain at large. 1 defendant has died. 13 unresolved cases await trial. Bach was convicted on 7 counts of wire fraud, conspiracy, and federal programs bribery, and will be sentenced to a long prison term. The total fraud in these cases comes to some $300 million. We haven't even got to the Medicaid fraud yet, which is the next section. The Feeding Our Future fraud cases opened a window on scams involving several Minnesota Medicaid programs. After the FBI executed search warrants in one such case in July of last year, then acting United States Attorney Joe Thompson, who until very recently was leading both the Feeding Our Future and the Medicaid fraud prosecutions, called the press conference in September to announce criminal charges against the first 8 Medicaid fraud defendants, all of whom are Somali. These initial cases were tied to Minnesota's Housing Stabilization Services Program, HSS, the purpose of which was to help people with disabilities find housing using Medicaid funds. Most of these cases, unlike a lot of Medicare and Medicaid fraud cases nationally, aren't just overbilling, Thompson said at the press conference. These are often just purely fictitious companies solely created to defraud the system, and that's unique in the extent to which we have here. Sorry, I'm totally botching that. Let me start over with that previous sentence. These are often just purely fictitious companies solely created to defraud the system. This is a quote from Thompson. And that's unique in the extent to which we have that here in Minnesota. That's end of the quote. The press release distributed at the press conference suggested that the HSS program seems to have been designed to facilitate fraud. Now, that is something we need to, I think we need to highlight that little quote there. I'm going to read it a second time. The press release distributed at the press conference suggested that the HSS program seems to have been designed to facilitate fraud. Designed by whom? Democrats. Democrats. Quote, by design, the program had low barriers to entry for new providers and for beneficiaries. The program also had minimal requirements for reimbursement, unquote. We'll shine it back up on the screen there. Yeah, there you go. The press release distributed at the press conference suggested that the HSS program seems to have been designed to facilitate fraud. By design, quote, by design, the program had low barriers to entry for new providers and for beneficiaries. The program also had minimal requirements for reimbursement, unquote. Uncovering fraud in Minnesota is like playing with Russian nesting dolls. Many of the owners of the involved HSS companies, Thompson said, had one or more other companies through which they build other Medicaid programs, such as early intensive development and behavioral intervention program, the adult rehabilitative mental health services program, the integrated community support program. I feel like I'm in the middle of a comic strip. I feel like I'm right in the middle of Dilbert, except for it's public sector. There's more programs. Sorry, I wasn't even finished. The Community Access for Disability Inclusion program. Ooh, that has the word inclusion in it. Say. Yeah, they're definitely about inclusion, aren't they? Including fraud, right? Seems like it's pretty obvious, right? That's what that means. Inclusion means fraud, including fraud. Personal care assistance services and other Medicaid waivered services. We're on page 6 of the print edition, and I'm enjoying reading this one. I'm not really enjoying it. It's kind of making me wince, actually. Makes me sick to my stomach. The details of these cases were almost incidental to Thompson's main point. Wow. That Minnesota is drowning in fraud. Now, that's a quote you want to stick on a coffee mug. I'd say that's January in Natural Right magazine, the centerfold, or, if you will, a calendar. Yeah, that's January. Sorry, January. Well, I guess, yeah, the centerfolds had January. Yeah, anyway, magazines. You probably don't even know what those are anymore. How many of you guys have a calendar on your wall? I do. Yeah, the details of these cases were almost incidental to Thompson's main point that, quote, Minnesota is drowning in fraud, unquote. It feels never ending, Thompson said. I have spent my career as a fraud prosecutor, and the depth of fraud in Minnesota takes my breath away. Jeez, that's a direct quote. On December 18th of last year, Thompson called another press conference to announce charges against 6 more defendants in connection with Minnesota's Medicaid programs. The new cases involved allegedly fraudulent claims in programs for housing, autism services, and assistance for disabled adults seeking to live independently. Every day we look under a rock and we find a new $50 million fraud scheme, Thompson said. Jeez. The total amount of money dispersed through these programs since 2018 is 18 billion. That's billion with a that's billion as in dog with a B as in dog. No, it's not 18 billion. That's a joke. 18 billion as in boy. Boy billion. Based on his ongoing investigations, Thompson estimated that as much as half of that amount, 9 billion, may have been paid out on fraudulent claims. The magnitude cannot be overstated, Thompson said. What we see in Minnesota is not a handful of bad actors committing crimes. It's a staggering industrial scale fraud. Man. 4 of the 6 defendants charged in December are Minnesotan Somalis, and those involved in the uncharged cases under investigation are almost entirely Somali. We dodged a bullet, man. The governor of this state was running as a vice presidential candidate in the last presidential election. Political responsibility. Two defendants from Philadelphia, Anthony Waddle Jefferson and Lester Brown, undertook what Thompson called fraud tourism. Man. Having heard that Minnesota's HSS program presented an easy mark, they set up in Minnesota to become fraudulent service providers. One wonders how a word of this was able to make its way to Philadelphia, but not to the state capital in St. Paul, where the people's elected officials are charged with protecting the public interest. Yeah, try to figure that one out. In a Star Tribune interview, Thompson cast the net widely in terms of responsibility. Quote, this fraud crisis didn't come out of nowhere. It's the result of widespread failure across nearly every level of leadership in Minnesota. Politicians who turned a blind eye, agencies that failed to act, prosecutors and law enforcement who didn't push hard enough, reporters who ignored the story, community, oh, I love that word, community leaders who stayed silent, and a public, yeah, Minnesotans, Democrats. Democrats in Minnesota. Minnesota. And a Democrat public in Minnesota that wanted to believe it couldn't happen here. And you know what? I misquoted him. He just says, and a public that wanted to believe it couldn't happen here. I added Democrats. Partly because it's a problem that the people can solve directly, I would focus on the politicians, three in particular. You know what? I would focus on the voters. That's what I would do because they put them there. These voters are idiots, and you got to fix that. You got to fix the idiot thing. If you're an idiot, then that's a problem, right? Am I right or am I right? Or am I right or am I right or am I right? Remember Groundhog Day? Am I right or am I right? Remember that? No? Is it me? I guess it might be just me. All right, the first is Governor Tim Walz. I've heard of him. I've heard of him. In November 2020, Feeding Our Future sued the Minnesota Department of Education for suspending the process of Feeding Our Future site applications, an action MDE officials had taken because they had good reason to suspect that Feeding Our Future was defrauding the state. Uh, I mean, I think that's a pretty good reason, don't you think? No? I would think. But what happened? What happened? The MDE was represented in this lawsuit by the Office of Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison. I've also heard of him, which resolved the lawsuit not under court order but voluntarily by backing down and agreeing to continue processing site applications. 2 years later, in 2022, when the Feeding Our Future scandal erupted and indictments were announced, and it is indictments, I know, but I like to have my little rebellions. Waltz falsely blamed a state district court judge rather than his attorney general for compelling the state to continue payments. This was only the first of many of Waltz's dishonest deflections of responsibility that continue to the present day. Waltz will never live down the frauds committed on agencies under his jurisdiction. The second is Attorney General Ellison himself. This past December, he released a widely mocked video in which he declared, quote, scammers think Minnesotans are easy targets. They are wrong, unquote. No, it is abundantly and increasingly clear that the scammers have been right. in large part due to Democrat Ellison's nonfeasance, as seen in the story of his failure to back the MDE against Feeding Our Future in 2020. Like Waltz, Ellison continues to refuse to sit for an interview with a serious reporter to answer questions about what he knew about the fraud and when he knew it. Nor has anyone in the mainstream media made an issue of that fact, which is a scandal in its own right. Wow. The third is U.S. Representative Ilhan Omar. Sounds like a contradiction in terms, doesn't it? U.S. Representative Ilhan Omar. Even if we leave aside the fact that she immigrated to the United States as a fraudulent member of the Omar family and later married her biological brother and her own Elmi family for future fraudulent purposes, we could still fairly describe her as Somali Fraud Exhibit A. Wow. Dang. That's crazy. She sponsored the Meals Act that facilitated the Feeding Our Future fraud, and her congressional district served as its epicenter. She was a friend of Salim Said, Aimee Bach's co-defendant in the second Feeding Our Future trial. She filmed a promotional video at Said's restaurant that was introduced by Said's lawyer at trial, although it actually served to support the charges against Said. Yet, despite these facts, Omar claims to have known nothing about the fraud. Public programs fraud on the scale we see today in Minnesota, and to a lesser degree, so far at least, in other states, indicates a leadership class that has either forgotten or no longer takes seriously the idea that public office is a public trust. What more fitting time could there be than the 250th anniversary year of the Declaration of Independence to restore the moral power of that idea in irresponsible state governments like that of Minnesota? I got to read that last part again. Wow. What more fitting time could there be than the 250th anniversary year of the Declaration of Independence to restore the moral power of that idea? What is that idea? That public office is a public trust. Public office is a public trust. What more fitting time could there be than the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence to restore the moral power of that idea in irresponsible state governments like that of Minnesota? Well, we've been interacting with and discussing Imprimis, a publication, a free publication of Hillsdale College. Go to Hillsdale.edu to sign up. They'll send it to you for free. Over 7.3 million readers. This edition is January 2026. It's volume 55, number 1, and it's titled Learning from Minnesota's Somali Fraud Scandal by Scott W. Johnson. Scott W. Johnson is a co-founder and contributed to PowerlineBlog.com. He earned his BA at Dartmouth College and his JD at the University of Minnesota Law School and practiced law for 35 years in the Twin Cities. A fellow of the Claremont Institute. Yeah! He has published widely on issues of public policy, including in National Review, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Post, the Minnesota Star Tribune, and the Washington Free Beacon. For more than 10 years, he has covered Minnesota's 5th District U.S. Representative Ilhan Omar and 3 major trials in Minnesota. involving Somali defendants. Thanks for joining me on the Republican Professor podcast. Go to Hillsdale.College.edu. Well, it's Hillsdale.edu or something. I think it's Hillsdale.edu. You can find it. It's free. They'll send it to you. And we like to thank Scott W. Johnson, for writing this and for Hillsdale College for making it available. Go to Hillsdale and support Hillsdale. I've been your host, Dr. Lucas J. Mather, at 6 March 2026 years after Jesus. It's a Friday. Take care. God bless you guys. We'll see you next time.